ALF listeners, this is a repost of episode 377, where I talked to Andy Thomsen about land-based fishing for coral trout. Now, I actually got lots of feedback from people on this episode who didn't realise that coral trout were actually an option from the shore, whether you're on an island camped, as Andy does, going out on his boat and then walking the shoreline, or even fishing headlands and inshore reefs and other structures that you can just access by walking from the mainland, not having to actually use a boat at all. So that was really cool, and I know that lots of people got value out of this episode and not only caught coral trout, but a whole range of other species that turn up when you're targeting trout. And you know, it's very rare that I don't listen back on an episode and find something new and learn something that I hadn't learned the first time round. So I thought it was a good time to go back and re-listen to Andy Thomsen's Whitsundays land-based coral trout episode. Before we do that though, I'd just like to point out that one of the important pieces of equipment that you need anytime you're shore-based fishing for coral trout or any other reef species is a good quality pair of fishing sunglasses. Because I can tell you for a fact that long days over years and years and years exposed to UV, exposed to bright glare, does enormous damage to your eyes, permanent damage to your eyes, irreparable damage to your eyes in some cases. So that's the first thing. But the other thing is a good quality pair of sunglasses enables you to see the water and everything in it in full color. And if they've got really good polarization, you can see through that surface glare, you can see through the reflection and see a lot more in terms of the structure and the fish and what you're casting to. So you get to see those fish eat the lures that much more often if you're wearing good sunglasses. Now, I'd say that you get what you pay for when you buy sunglasses, but in my opinion, when you buy tonic sunglasses, you actually get more than what you pay for. I can tell you that I've worn pretty much every major brand of sunglasses over the last 2 or 3 decades of fishing, and I can tell you that the only brand that I've reached out to and almost begged them to allow me to bring their product to ALF listeners, because I want you folks to experience what I've experienced in terms of comfort, fit, and amazing clarity and amazing ability to be able to spot fish and structure. There's one more thing about tonics you have to understand though, and this is really important when you're walking rocky shorelines as you do fishing for coral trout, and that is that the lenses are decentered, and not all sunglasses are decentered, just the really good ones. And what optical decentering does is it removes the distortion that you get in the peripheral vision when you're wearing sunglasses. And that doesn't seem very important until you're walking around on uneven surfaces like rock walls and reefs, and you've got wet, shiny surfaces and that sort of thing, and you're trying to stay upright, and all of a sudden you realize just how important it is that your sunglasses don't distort your vision. It's just one of those ways that Tonic have gone those extra yards to bring a really, really good product to the market at a really good price point. Now, here's the best news, ladies and gents. You can support the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast and help to keep us on air and help to keep these episodes coming out week after week after week by buying yourself one of the best pairs of sunglasses you will ever find and getting them at the best price guaranteed. Plus, you get a membership to Team Doc Lures thrown in, and you get a couple of packets of Pro Lure clone prawns thrown in as well. Total value of those bonuses, over $120. Absolutely free when you buy a pair of tonic sunglasses from Team Doc Lures at the best price around. So go and check that out. doclures.com/tonic. We'll take you to that page, doclures.com/tonic. Or, of course, you can go to the show notes for this episode. It's episode 377 over at doclures.com. That's 377. Type that into the search bar at doclures.com. It'll bring up this episode, and there will be a link there to where you can try my virtual assistant to find the pair of tonics that fits you, and, of course, go and buy yourself some tonics and get a great deal on a membership and all those great bonuses as well. Super important, please, whatever you do, don't go land-based fishing for coral trout without a good quality pair of sunglasses with the right lenses, by the way, so you can see the fish in all their glory. Anyway, folks, let's hit the play button and play episode 377, Andy Thomsen on land-based coral trout.
You can tell if it's a coral trout by the way it dives back under the structure. So they're one of the really, like the other fish would be a tusk fish. They really dive into the coral or rocks when they get hooked. So they do like that.
Hey folks, Greg Docklew's Vinyl here. You know, not everybody has a boat, and not everybody wants a boat. Well, hang on. I think everybody does want a boat, or everybody I know wants a boat anyway. But not everybody does have a boat, and not everybody needs a boat to catch great fish. And even those people who do own boats, like today's guest, Andy Thomsen, sometimes like to leave the boat behind and do a bit of shore-based fishing, or in Andy's case, he takes a boat to an island, then he gets off and he walks and puts in some casts from the shore. And that's what today's episode is all about. So whether you have a boat and are looking for something different to do, or you don't have a boat and you want to go out and catch some quality fish, Andy's going to share with us his tips for catching coral trout from the shore, and I'll tell you more about what's in store right after the intro music.
This is the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, where we share the secrets of Australia's lure fishing gurus every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. And now here's your host, Greg Vinal from doclures.com.
Well, folks, welcome to episode 377 of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Doclures Vinal, and it's great to have your company once again for another stimulating chat with another of Australia's great anglers. I bring 3 anglers aboard every week to share their tips about catching fish on lures so that you and I can catch more fish on lures ourselves. Now, today's guest is a repeat guest on the ALF podcast, but he's also well known on social media. And I'm talking, of course, about Andy Thomsen. If you don't know him by his full name, you might know him as Andy from Andy's Catch and Cook if you watch his great videos on YouTube, or perhaps by the handle Andy's Fishing if you keep an eye on him on Facebook or Instagram. Whichever way you cut it, Andy's a guy who spends a lot of time fishing, and he puts a lot of effort into stimulating, encouraging, and of course inspiring others to have a crack at getting out and enjoying the great outdoors, whether it's lure fishing, whether it's crabbing, whether it's catching prawns, doing a bit of spear fishing. Andy does all of that, and then of course he shares some great recipes for cooking his catch up on the beach, on the riverbank, in the forest, wherever it might be. Very entertaining series. If you haven't found his YouTube channel, go and check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes of today's episode. And as I say, it's entertaining, it's inspiring, it's informative. You really need to go and have a look at it. Anyway, last time we spoke to Andy, we were talking about sooty grunder fishing in the fresh. This time we've gone the other direction and we're headed out to the salt because a number of Andy's recent YouTube videos have highlighted his ability to target coral trout from the shore. So as I said, right at the start, he often goes out to an island, leaves the boat on the beach or leaves it swinging from a pick, and he'll go for a walk along the beach, clamber around the rocky headlands, over the reefs, whatever he needs to do to get a lure in the water to where there are some fish. And one of the common species that he pulls out of those areas is the coral trout. Now, I'm sure a lot of our listeners who are in Northern Australia would love to have a bit of a crack at this themselves. Coral trout are one of those species that's found right across the reef, so all the boaties can go out and fish even in 100 metres of water or more and catch coral trout. But the shore-based anglers can get their share as well because these fish do come in quite shallow, in a metre or less of water, if you get the right conditions, the right places, and you've got the right gear. And Andy's going to walk us through everything we need to know to be able to make that happen. Now, speaking of making things happen, have you noticed that some ALF podcasts now have extended versions? That's because the community over at Team Doc Lures, who support the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, can now see ahead of time who I'm going to be interviewing in the coming weeks, and they can post questions for those guests. And best of all, those questions don't go in the regular podcast. They go into an extended episode that's put in the Team Doc Lures website and on the Team Doc Lures private members feed. So all of our members get some extra listening, some extra information, but not only that, it's the information they want. It's the questions that they've asked. When you mix that in with access to a panel of experts, and a great members area where everyone can hang out in a troll-free environment, hook up with some fishing mentors if you want to. We've got a social mentoring program where you can hook up with some fishing mentors, and these are top guys, many of them ALF podcast guests. And then, of course, there's the audio masterclasses, which are also available from the Team Doc Lures website or in the Team Doc Lures private members feed. So those are where we get some top anglers to go in depth on some techniques or some locations or some species. And we get a lot more information than what we get in the regular ALF podcast. And they're over on the Team Doc Lures side as well. So quite a massive information starting to accumulate there. Lots of high quality anglers starting to hang out at Team Doc Lures. You can be part of that too, and at the same time support the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast by going over and visiting team.doclures.com and joining up. It's as simple as that. You can sign up from that page. Away you go. Straight away you'll have access to all of those great resources. That's team.doclures.com. But now, folks, I don't know if you can hear a drum roll in the background. No, there's no drum roll in the background, but there should be because I'm about to bring Andy Thomsen to the microphone and we're about to start talking Mackay Whitsundays coral trout from the shore. Here we go with Andy Thomsen, episode 377. Enjoy, and I will talk to you at the other end. Folks, it's always fun to talk to people who are doing different things and catching species in different ways or locations you might not expect or using techniques you might not expect. And today's guest, Andy Thomsen, does lots of fishing, lots of video. lots of different things, but he's been catching coral trout from the shore. And I know it's not unusual. I know a lot of people do this, but the majority of people, I would suspect, target their coral trout from a boat out on the reef somewhere. Andy's not. He's targeting them from the shore. So, Andy, welcome aboard, mate. Great to have you back on the show.
Hey, Greg. Yeah, it's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah, there's been, I think, probably a few hundred episodes since we last spoke. And the last time we chatted, it was all about sooty grunter. And you gave our listeners a great rundown on how to target sooty grunter. But this is something completely different, mate.
Yeah, like you said, like you said, I do tend to do things different from the normal person. And it's all about keeping your eyes and ears open and going with the flow, I reckon.
Yeah, we love that. I mean, it's easy to, and we all want to find a quick way to get to where we want to be, right? We all want to be able to catch fish sooner, and it's nice to find little shortcuts and do a bit of reading or listen to a podcast or watch some YouTube and get some hints. But the problem comes if we just start to assume that everything we read and see and watch is always fact. And what we find when we start talking to people like you is there's all kinds of things that go on that maybe aren't so widely known. And this coral trout off the shore, it's something that a lot of people probably don't realise they can do.
No, they're actually a very aggressive fish. Most people would know that mangrove jack are very aggressive, but yeah, I guess coral trout, the sort of reef equivalent of a mangrove jack. If you go swimming around the fringing reef, probably the easiest fish to spear is a coral trout, because they'll stand their ground, they'll check you out, they'll go away, they'll come back. And they're just really inquisitive and quite territorial.
Yep. Well, the mangrove jack I refer to as the thugs of the estuary. The coral trout, well, there's probably a few species on the reef, but the coral trout are definitely one of the thugs on the reef.
Yeah.
So, mate, let's start to delve into some things that might help some of our listeners to get a bit of a head start. And as I said at the beginning, this is all about giving you a few hints, but at the end of the day, you've got to get out there and give it a go and figure some stuff out for yourselves. But in terms of where we might go to look for coral trout, now, you're fishing in the central Queensland area. Let's pick a location. Should we say, I don't know, Mackay area, somewhere like that?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So if we were heading for Mackay, wanted to target coral trout from the shore, give us a bit of an idea about where we might find fish. And we don't want your secret spots or anything, but in terms of how you'd go about doing the research and what you'd be looking for and what we should be looking for when we go looking for a coral trout.
Yeah, so if I get sidetracked, bring me back to the question.
No problem.
I tend to get sidetracked.
I'm not going to bring you back to the question if you're giving us good information, but if you get sidetracked and it's not good information, I'll bring you back real quick.
Yeah, no worries. My first thought was I actually spent a lot of time down in Mackay, and there's a lot of beaches, and obviously you're going to stay away from the beaches because, coral trout don't live
in coral.
Yeah, well, no, here we go.
Excellent. Good.
The first misconception is that coral trout have to live on a reef or coral, and I don't know if they necessarily have to live or just, they move around and be opportunistic. But I've found them around rocks, even mangroves, under jetties. Yeah, they're very opportunistic.
I think maybe the name is a bit of a misconception, isn't it? Coral trout, you assume it's coral. But it's really any kind of hard structure, isn't it? They really like gnarly country, generally.
Yes.
And you're going to prove me wrong, I know, because we've had a bit of a chat before I hit the record button. You've got some examples of where they're not in that sort of heavy structure.
Well, yeah, I mean, even when you're bait fishing or jigging, you can tell if it's a coral trout by the way it dives back under the structure. So they're one of the really, like the other fish would be a tusk fish. They really dive into the coral or rocks when they get hooked.
But they're a bit like the mangrove jack. They got a reputation for being on the turn when they take the lure, already being on their way back into cover, and the coral trout are a bit the same.
Exactly, yeah. So back to the question, I guess more like the sort of, I'll do another little side note before we get into that.
Please.
On my YouTube channel, which is Andy's Fishing, in case someone doesn't know what it is.
Oh, we're going to plug that, don't you worry. Yep, keep going.
That's all right. It's a lot of people don't know me by my full name. Oh, where was I going with that?
Oh, I've completely set you off track now, so.
Yeah, you have. That was it. I got it now. Yeah, people ask me in the comments, can you give me a spot in this area, or I want a spot in that area? And if I give someone a spot, you might catch a fish there, you might not catch a fish there.
Yeah.
Because locations tide dependent, sometimes daylight dependent. and sometimes wind dependent.
Hmm.
All of those things play a part, and giving someone a spot is no guarantee they'll catch a fish. If anything, it frustrates them more.
Exactly. And that's why on the show we never ask for specific locations. And I say to people all the time, I don't care how many GPS marks you have or might want. A GPS mark's just a starting point. You've got to get there, and that means there has been fish there at some point, but you've still got to work out what's going on there. They may not be there this particular point in time. They might be somewhere else, somewhere nearby, somewhere further away, but it's just a starting point. So, yeah, we tend to look just for, what are the structures or what are the types of, the depth of water or those sorts of things that we might be looking for.
Yeah. The question you've got to ask yourself when you find a spot that you've caught fish is why?
Yeah.
Why are the fish there?
Great question.
That's the question, yeah. So getting back to the coral trout, I prefer cleaner water to dirty water. So that eliminates most river mouths. Not all, but most river mouths. Beaches, no structure, unless, if there's a nice pile of rocks or something, possible, definitely possible.
Mm.
They quite like a bit of current. So points and even little bits of fringing reef, I've found the bigger and better trout and more trout are on the corners, which indicates current going past, food being more available. And then you want structure. And the structure doesn't have to be coral. It can be rocks. It can be mangroves, anything like that.
Anything hard.
Yes, yeah. Something for them to grab your bait, your lure, and dive straight back in and bust you off.
Yeah, that's it. Awesome. Yep. So if we were to hop onto Google Earth, we can get a lot of information just by looking at Google Earth and scanning around, finding places where, A, there's access because we're shore-based, so we don't have the luxury of being able to zap from one place to another as we would in a boat. But we can look for areas where there's those kinds of structures. You can look for points. You can get an idea. And as you say, anywhere there's a point, there's likely to be currents as well. What else should we look for on Google Earth that might be a bit of an indicator?
Yeah, I think that the points is probably not a bad one at all. And if you've got Google Earth, depending on when the image was taken, whether it was like a really high tide or a really low tide,
you can see different bits of structure.
Yeah, and depths as well. So probably my bigger trout have come from water that's a bit deeper, but if the water's, say, 6 or 8 metres deep, a trout is not going to come up to a popper.
No.
So,
and also, if the water's 6 or 8 metres deep, then in all likelihood, you're not going to be able to see that, any kind of structure on Google Earth. So you're going to have to use some other techniques or local knowledge or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I've also found if the water is probably shallower than half a metre, possibly even a metre, you probably won't get the trout.
Okay.
So you're looking for that zone of, say, 1.5 to 4 metres. That's the sort of thing you're looking for.
Okay. So let's just recap on that because we've rambled a little bit. So we're looking for clean water where there's a bit of water movement, 1 to 4 metres deep, some kind of hard structure that's going to hold the trout.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of things like tides, and obviously, tide, when you're fishing from the shore, determines how much water there is over the structure or whether the structure's even in the water. But in terms of tides, in terms of weather conditions, cloud cover, barometric pressure, wind, all those sorts of things, could you give us an idea of what makes a good day to target coral trout from the shore?
I really do not worry about barometric pressure at all.
Great. Love to hear that. Yep. Cool.
Yeah. I have never bothered
Let's scrub that
out
off.
what it is. Wind and wave action, that's probably more a comfort thing unless you're using poppers. If you're using poppers, obviously, if it's really rough and choppy, fish, they don't feel it in their
lateral lines.
Their lateral line, that's the word, yeah. And they don't hear it and possibly don't see it as much either. So if it's a windy day, you're not going to go in Australia on the eastern side of a headland, say.
Yep.
Generally, yeah. If it's blowing southeast, which it almost always does, especially this time of year, sometimes it goes northerly, but you want to fish either the northern side, which is protected, or the western side of peninsula or...
So I guess, and I'm just reading between the lines a little bit here, windy days, apart from you've got tidal currents and that sort of thing, but wind also creates currents as well. So on a windy day, if you can find a place that's sheltered enough that the fish are going to be able to see and feel and sense a popper on the surface, then the wind's probably going to work in your favour, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I don't want to limit it to poppers. I've said poppers a few times, but
That was my initial thought is, yep, well, I'd be switching over to a sinking stick bait or something, but I'm curious to see what you'd switch over to. So, yeah, we definitely won't limit it to poppers, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Stick bait, sinking, yeah, but also like big plastics work as well. And as long as your lure doesn't go down too far, like a shallow diving lure.
Yep, okay, cool. All right, no worries. I'm going to talk about lures and tackle in some detail a bit later on, but let's just finish this discussion about the conditions and finding fish and that sort of stuff. So if you're talking about the fish liking a fair bit of water movement, then I would imagine that you'd like to fish around the new moon and full moon periods where you've got bigger tides. Would that be right?
To me, no.
Okay.
No, it's more about when I'm out there.
So on any tide, you'll find somewhere where there's a bit of flow, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I just remembered a time when I was out in the boat and it was small tides, no wind, crystal clear water, and I could see the trout, like literally coral trout, sitting on the bottom and they wouldn't touch anything. Like you can't have two perfect conditions.
Yeah.
Those guys were obviously very aware and just would not play ball.
Well, that's it. When the water's clear and there's no wind on the surface and no water movement and they're aware of everything around them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like for your listeners, I would not get hung up on it's got to be the second half of the first quarter moon sort of thing.
Yeah, great.
If the conditions feel good, if you found a good spot, if the water's roughly the right depth, between, say, 1.5 to 3-4 metres, give it a go.
Yep.
Give it a go.
Sounds good. Can't go wrong. The only way you can miss out is we're not going out there and giving it a go, because even if you don't catch anything,
yeah, you're still learning.
You'll learn, and that's part of the process. The more time you spend out there, the more effective and efficient you'll become. Mate, let's move on and talk about tackle, because like you said, these are the thugs. These are the tough guys on the reef. They're hard enough in a boat where you might be, fighting them vertically and have some chance of keeping them out of the reef. But when you're fishing from the shore, you've got a lot of line out between you and the fish can go in lots of different directions, up, down, left, right. They can be pretty tough. So walk us through rods, reels, lines and leaders for targeting these tough customers from the shore.
We'll say it again. I'm unconventional.
Yeah, good.
So, yeah, the last few big trout I've got in my videos have been on quite large GT gear, pretty much. Two reasons for that. One is, yes, to pull them out of the structure, but two, I like to chuck the big stick baits or poppers for them.
So you need gear that's going to handle the weight of the lure and be able to impart an action, yeah.
Yeah, and you want to cast it, like if you're on a bit of a rock or something and you can see a bommy, whether it's trout actually love weed as well. Like,
oh, interesting. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, a weed-covered rock or a bit of coral that's got weed around it. They're very happy in that.
Good tip. Good tip.
Yeah. So, yeah, you want something that you can reach those spots from the land and cast far enough to cast to that bommy or structure. And you want to cast both sides, left and right. Over the top, yes, but more left than right.
Yeah, the danger with over the top is the fish is going to take it on the other side of the rock.
Well, that does happen, yes.
Let's go through what you're using then. So heavy GT gear, what does that look like for you?
Well, the one I'm using at the moment is a Finor LT100, I think, which is like a 10,000 size reel. You could go as low as 5,000 or 6,000. Any lower, well, it depends on the size of your lure. If you're casting small lures, 4,000 you might get away with.
Okay.
Yeah.
And rods, mate? Obviously you need a rod that's going to cope with whatever line class you're using.
Yeah, because I actually do a lot of creek fishing, boat fishing. So my rods are generally a lot shorter. But I think for land-based, if you don't have a boat, a little bit longer rod will get you that little bit more distance.
Okay. If you're a boat angler, you're just having a bit of a go off the shore for something different or for whatever reason, then you'll get by with the gear you've got. If you're looking at doing this as you're not going to be a boating angler, but you're going to fish from the shore all the time, then you'd recommend a bit longer rod, casting distance obviously and leverage.
Yeah, for the rods I usually 6 to 6.5 foot, but if you're only going to do land-based stuff, probably go 6.5 to 7 foot or that sort of thing.
Okay. And line class, mate, what sort of braid are you running on the Finor reels?
Oh, those ones are 80 pound.
80 pound, yep.
But it's a lot of overkill for coral trout. But so, yeah, I'm going to say 30-pound braid would be okay on a 4,000 or 5,000 reel. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The other thing with lighter braid is you can cast further too.
You can. And if you're working lures that dive, and that's not such an issue here if you're fishing in reasonably shallow water with surface or midboard lures, but if you are working lures that you want to get down deeper, they'll get deeper on a lighter line.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's talk about leaders, because braid, doesn't matter what strength braid you're using, if it touches coral or rock or a jetty pylon or whatever, you're done and dusted, but you need that little bit of protection between the braid and the lure, and that comes in the form of a leader. So what are you tying to the business end of your line?
Yep, I'd like to add oysters to that, because the last 2 trout I got, I think in last Tuesday's video, actually came from oyster rocks.
Yep.
I was in a boat, but they were closer to the shore when they hit than they were to me.
Right.
So 10 metres from the shore, not even 5 metres from the shore. I'm quite happy using monofilament.
Yep.
If you want to save a few dollars, monofilament is fine, and it is quite abrasion resistant. But if you're happy to spend a little bit more, or you want that little extra edge, your fluorocarbon, it's actually a little bit more abrasion resistant, and it's also clearer in the clearer water. Like it has the similar refractive index of water as opposed to mono.
Yes. Yep. All right. Cool. And what thickness? What weight?
Pound?
Yeah.
Yeah. 40 would be an absolute minimum.
Yep.
Probably 60 if you can get away with it.
Yep. It's one of those things, isn't it? If they're being a bit shy and coy, you might need to drop down to 40, but otherwise maybe start with 60.
Yeah. And my second last video.
You're producing so many videos, you can't remember what you've done, mate.
Yeah. And I've caught 3, I've eaten or caught 3 decent trout in the last 3 videos off either really, really close to shore, off or from the shore. But yeah, that was a 130-pound leader on the GT rod.
Yes.
So sometimes it doesn't matter how thick the leader is.
Yeah. Sometimes they are, like you say, they're an aggressive species, and sometimes they're just going to eat. They're not going to be leader shy. They're not going to care. They're just going to smack whatever comes their way.
Yeah. And if people are wanting a sort of a good type of leader, I find Black Magic works quite well.
It's good. Yep. And easy to find. Most tackle shops carry it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, cool. All right, mate. Well, you know what comes next. We're going to start working our way through some lure selections. So I normally try and keep it down to 3. I'm happy to do 1 or 2 more if you need to, but you've mentioned poppers a few times, so let's start there, mate. What sort of poppers should we be throwing around off the shore for coral trout?
I like the rooster. The Elko roosters. They've got a good face on them. You can chug them, or you can like just a sort of constant retrieve.
The thing I like about the roosters, and this is a lure that comes up over and over again, it's come up for coral trout on multiple occasions, is they're just a no-nonsense lure, you know. Most of the Halco lures they're just solid, well-made, and not overly expensive. So, but the rooster poppers come in sizes from, I don't know, I think about 45 millimetres up to 200 millimetres. So you're going to have to narrow down the size range for us a little bit.
Yeah. So probably for trout, the minimum probably you'd want is 4 inches.
Okay.
And then it depends on how big a trout you think you've got in the area or you want to catch. I actually did a little bit of research the other day, and they grow up to 25 kilos.
Yeah, can you imagine trying to stop one of those off the shore?
Oh, no, you wouldn't stop it. No matter what gear you've got. I wouldn't want to eat one. I think I limit my coral trout to like under 60 centimetres. Anything bigger than that, I don't want to eat because of the ciguatera buildup.
Very important, yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere between 4 and 6 inches would be a good popper size.
Good sort of size range. Okay, cool. It's interesting because, you know, small fish will obviously take small lures, big fish will take big lures and small lures. But with coral trout, I mean, I've seen fairly small 30, 40 centimetre coral trout that smack GT lures. So if they're aggressive, they're going to have a crack. But I guess if they're not in such an aggressive mood, you're using that sort of medium size range, 100 to 150 millimetre sort of size lures is going to be the go. Hooks and rings, mate, they're pretty good on the Halco Popper. You don't upgrade them or anything?
No.
No, okay, cool.
Sometimes I replace them if I've had the lure for a few years and they get a bit rusty or dull.
Or you see a damaged point or anything like that, or a coral trout bends them open. Not likely to bend the hooks on a Halco. I think they're VMC 4Xs or 6Xs on the Halco Poppers, so not going to straighten them. But how do you fish the rooster poppers?
So chugging them makes a lot of noise and draws a lot of attention.
Yep. But there's chugging and there's chugging. I mean, you can do little 6-inch twitches or you can do big sweeps of the rod or, so is there one particular technique that works best or is it a case of just work through all of them?
No, and it also depends on if you've got a bit of a surface ripple or a bit of wave action. If you go too vigorous or the wrong timing, your lure's cartwheeling out of the water half the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So you want to keep the lure in the water.
Mm.
And sometimes I find that maybe like a more constant retrieve rather than chugging.
Yep, okay.
And will get you a better result too.
Yeah. Is that better when the water's a bit calmer because it kind of leaves a bubble trail or something, or can that be effective in rough water as well?
Yeah, I'd probably go rough as well.
Okay. No worries. All right, mate, let's turn to lure choice number 2.
So stick bait, probably the one, well, there's two that I've had really good success on. I did a bit of a product review on a lure called Fish and Wood. They're extremely expensive. I think by the time they get to Australia, they're like $150 or something each.
Yep. So you don't want to lose too many of those to coral trout.
Yeah, dream about that one. The one I use a lot is Lively Lures Slick Stick.
Okay.
Alan, who owns Lively Lures, he actually got an Australian Design Award for that lure.
Yep.
And they're tough they're built bulletproof. They've got extremely good hooks on them, and the finish is, I prefer the chromey sort of finishes. Yeah, great lure for that. Yeah.
And again, like the Halcos, all of the Lively Lures range, tough as nails, built for Australian fish. Yeah, you can't go wrong. So how do you fish that particular lure, mate?
Probably, cast it out really nice and far past your structure. And then not like a full-on GT, like pull and then wind. A bit slower, quite a bit slower. Yeah, so you want to be able to feel the stick bait, the slick stick, go wobble, wobble, and then that's when you pull your rod back, wind, and then wobble, wobble.
Okay. And on the pause, keeping in touch with the lure so that if it gets smashed.
Yeah, so you pull your rod back, which gives you the wobble, wobble, and then you wind to pick up the slack. So you're in contact with it the whole time. Because you really, like, if you're in, say, 1.5 meters of water and trout grabs it, you've probably got between half and 1 second before he's grabbed that and gone into the coral or the reef, the rocks. So you need to be connected.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit shortly about techniques for extracting the fish. But, typically when a fish hits your lure, it's heading in the right direction, and the idea is to try and keep it heading in the right direction and not let it turn. So I'm going to be keen to get your tips on how to do that shortly. But all right, so that's 2 lures down, mate. Hit us with lure choice number 3.
Okay, another really tough one, and I've only just started using them. They're called Samson lures. They're actually designed for rock fishermen, like shore fishermen, to cast long way out. Let's see if I can remember the name. I think the last one I used off actually an island was the Tweak 85 gram.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 85 grams. I'm just trying to think. I think it's maybe 120 mil long, and they come with different skins, so you can like heat shrink different colours on them. So that actually got me a couple of really nice fish, the Tweak 85.
Yeah, and this is a stick bait again, so it's fished in much the same way.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They come in different speeds of sinking too. You can have fast sink or slow sink or medium.
Yeah, I'd imagine slow and medium are going to be the ones to go for if you're fishing off the shore.
Sometimes you want to fast if it's a little bit deeper, yeah.
Mate, you mentioned big soft plastics as well, so let's just throw one of those in to round out the lure selection. So there's lots of them around. What would you be choosing?
With soft plastics, I'd probably go the Z-Mans. The main reason for this, they've got that stretch.
That 10x plastic.
Exactly, yeah. And sometimes you get barracuda come and attack it. And I think last video I had like 5-6 strikes from barracuda, and then I finally caught one, so I figured out what they were. And there was nothing missing on that plastic. Most other plastics, you would have the tail gone, half the body gone.
Now, Z-Man produce about, 500 million different lure styles. So let's narrow it down a bit to a particular model and size and colours if you have preferences there as well.
Yeah, so probably white is one of my favourites, or that sort of see-through crystal sort of colour with a flash in it, yeah. For the trout, I would probably go with a little fork tail, not a paddle tail. And I don't think I'd use a curly tail either. So I can't think of the actual name
They're
right
usually
now.
referred to as jerk shads or something. There's a few different names,
That's
but
it.
yeah, you're going to be using, these are a lure that you need to impart a bit of right action because they if you just crank them in, they don't have a lot of action and they're designed to be that way.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to describe this, but I go flick, 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 just like little tick, 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 tick.
And then pause, recover your line, do it again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
In terms of the size of the lure and how you're rigging it up, jig heads and all that sort of stuff, give us some juicy details on that.
I do a lot of fishing with weedless hooks because I just find jig heads just get stuck real quick.
So the extra wide gape worm hook type things?
Yes. And the weight really depends on, the depth or what current and how far you're casting as well.
So those worm hooks come weighted in various ways. You can get the ones that are sort of belly weighted, so they're like a keel, or you can attach one of the snake lock style, TT jig heads to the front, or put a ball sinker in the loop knot, or whatever you need to do to weight the lure to get it out there. What are your preferences there?
I was just going to say the ball sinker in the loop I've never seen anybody do it. It just seemed like a really practical thing for me to do. That is probably one.
Lots of barra guys do it.
Yeah, that's probably my favourite is that. Yeah, because it's a bit cheaper.
It's effective. It's easy.
You can have different sizes. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Excellent, mate. All right, well, that's got our lure selection now down. One last question on the lures, though. So we've got a popper, we've got 2 sinking stick baits, and we've got a soft plastic. What would prompt you to choose any one of those lures on a given day? Is it structure? Is it conditions? What would make you look at a stretch of water and go, right, I'm going to hit the coral trout with a popper here as opposed to a soft plastic?
Possibly bycatch. So if I think I might pick up a trevally, like a good size GT or something like that, I'll go for the popper. Otherwise, probably the stick bait.
Okay. So reading between the lines, what you're basically saying is it doesn't really matter for the coral trout. They're going to take any of those.
No, they're pretty aggressive.
Cool. All right, Andy, I've got one more question for you, but before we do that, I'd like to have a bit of a chat.
Oh, hang on. If you're fishing in sort of country that looks really gnarly, you might want to go with the soft plastic because they're not going to cost you as much.
And you can rig them weedless as well, so they're less likely to get hung up.
Exactly. There's a different spin on it, yeah.
Cool. All right, mate. Now, as I say, I've got one final question for you, but before we do that, might be a good time now to just have a bit of a chat about your sponsors, because I know you've got a few businesses that look out for you and who you look out for. So would you like to give them a bit of a shout out, mate? And then I'd like to talk about your YouTube channel.
Okie dokie. Well, if you watch my catch and cook videos, sometimes camping, the Drifter guys, they're called Drifter 4x4 Camping. They do a lot of really quality gear, and Luke tries to get stuff made in Australia as much as he can. If not, it's generally quality gear from Japan or Korea or wherever. Let's see, Alan, he's going to be on the scene again very shortly.
This is Alan Dolan from Lively Lures.
Alan Dolan from Lively Lures, yep. I should have said that, shouldn't I? So we're going to see some nice lures from him very shortly, I think. Let's see, the Samson lures.
Now, are they Australian made or are they New Zealand made? They're not international, are they?
They've got a company that's registered, I think, in the UK. They've got a branch in Australia, and I've got a feeling they're made in South Africa.
Anyway, that's all right. I was just curious, but yeah. So Samson lures, and they've definitely, I've heard a bit about them in recent times from various sources, and a lot of it's been land-based guys who are targeting tuna and trevally and all sorts of stuff along the Queensland coast, but they're pretty good down south as well for a whole range of species down there, kingies and the like. Yeah,
and those lures, they do cast like a bullet.
Yep, that's what you want. Okay. Any other sponsors, mate? How long have we got?
Well, you've just put me on the spot. It's like, no, occasionally I do product placements for different companies. So, I should have a nice hot water system by Dukla coming up shortly. Because it's coming into winter, I'm looking forward to using that one, actually.
Yeah. No roughing it for you, mate.
I know. Did you see my jungle episode where I made a bed out of some sticks?
I've seen it, yeah.
That was pretty rough that night.
All good. All right, mate, let's talk a little bit more about your YouTube channel because you've been going for quite a while now. You've got over 200,000 subscribers. You bang out some pretty cool videos. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and where you're headed in the future. And, give us if you want to, give us a bit of a teaser about what's coming up in your videos that are coming out shortly.
Well, the reason you got back onto me, I think, was the land-based trout I've been getting, yeah. I think maybe the last 3 out of the 4 last episodes, I've caught some very decent coral trout. I think sort of, high 40s, mid 50s sort of thing from the land. I have been trying to do a lot more overnight island sort of stuff. We're actually got 20 to 30 knot winds at the moment. So,
which is why I was able to get you on the phone, because otherwise you're either busy editing or you're out fishing. So I'm grateful for the strong winds.
we actually I went out with a friend yesterday. We went to a completely new area and checked out a couple of creeks, and I think we'll head back there. I've got 2 nice mud crabs, which if anyone watches me, I'm shocking with mud crabs, but got 2 undersized and 2 legal bucks. So that was really good. I'll be cooking them up today, actually. Tasty for lunch.
Excellent. And look, I think that's one of the things that's really appealing about your channel too. It's fishing, but it's also outdoors living and that sort of, I guess, adventure type stuff. And then you've thrown the cooking in on top, mate, and it's always entertaining and gives people some ideas and makes it possible for people to sort of dream about what they might want to do as well.
Oh, it's all about inspiring people. That's what I like to do is get people to get inspired to get out there and try new things.
Yeah, well, you definitely do that. And, mate, what I'll do, we'll put some show notes together as we always do for the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. And in the show notes, I'll put a link through, obviously, to your YouTube channel, but I'll actually link to those last 3 videos because by the time this podcast goes live, you'll have probably smashed out another couple of videos, I'd imagine. So to help people find those ones that contain some coral trout footage and coral trout stories, I'll make sure I link them from the show notes. So, folks, if you go over to doclures.com, jump onto the search bar there and just type in Thomsen, Thomsen, that will bring up the show notes for this particular episode and also for Andy's previous episode where we talked about sooty grunter. But if you're after coral trout stuff, that'll bring up the show notes for this episode. You can go through, find the links, go and watch his YouTube channel. Make sure if you go there and watch the videos, you also subscribe because then you'll know every time a new video comes out and you'll be glad you did because there's lots of good stuff going up there all the time. So that'll all be over at doclures.com. So, mate, it's been fabulous talking to you, but I have one last question to round things out and take us home. And I've already kind of hinted at what it's going to be, and it's some tips, I think, for extracting those coral trout once you've tempted them to take a lure. Because let's face it, getting them to take the lure can be the easy part in a lot of cases. Getting them out of the reef is the hard part. So leave us with a couple of tips, mate.
Okay, so if people watch my most recent island video, I believe, that was let's see, I can't remember the name. I think it was 50 centimetres plus coral trout on the heavy gear, and as soon as you see them smash the lure, I yank the rod up nice and high in the air, which a lot of people don't like that sort of technique, but I've got used to it over the years with fly fishing around the reef and lure fishing. You just want to try and lift their head as quickly as possible and go as hard as possible, because I think when you pull hard, it disorientates them.
Yeah.
And the thing that they're looking, they can't get to because you're pulling them sideways.
They know that reef really, really well. They know if they're threatened exactly where they're going to go. If you can confuse them for just half a second when they're a little bit away from it, and also what you're talking about, by lifting the rod up like that, if they're a metre from their lair when they've nailed your lure, then by the time you lifted the rod, they're 1.5 metres, and you've got an extra quarter of a second to control them. That can be the difference.
Yeah. So the phrase you want to remember is high and hard.
High and hard, yep. I think the other thing when you're land-based, the other thing you can also do is, as you're striking them, take a couple of steps backwards,
Yeah, depending on where you are.
Yep.
Slippery rocks, jagged rocks.
Yep.
Yeah, just watch out where you are when you do that one.
Yep. Excellent. All right, mate. One final question actually that's come to me as we've been just talking through this techniques for getting out of the rocks. Setting the hooks, mate. Do you need to strike like a GT strike, or do they generally find the hooks pretty well when they smash the lure?
Yeah, they usually get hooked pretty well. I definitely wouldn't pump it like a GT. You see some people like
really banging those hooks home. Yeah, yep.
No. For me, it's more to get them away from the structure.
Away from the structure. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And that always sets the hook.
Yep. Terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming along, Andy, and for sharing so much great knowledge with us today. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. It's always a lot of fun watching your videos. Please continue to bang them out because you certainly are entertaining and inspiring a large number of people, and we really appreciate that. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing your next video really soon.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, let's talk a bit more not leave it so long next time.
I would love to, mate. I think we could do a lot of good collaborative stuff together. So let's pencil that into our diaries, eh?
Yeah, it's a date.
Folks, how inspiring is Andy Thomsen, hey? I mean, I have to admit, after I conducted that interview with Andy, I went and checked all of my tackle and went, you know what? I think I've got all the gear I need to give this a crack. And I got all excited. I haven't had a chance yet because of weather and work, but I certainly got inspired to go out and target some coral trout from the shore, and I intend to do that in the coming weeks. So I hope that episode inspired you guys as well. Now, speaking of being inspired, there's plenty of inspirational stuff over at Team Doc Lures. So for those who'd like some audio masterclasses, or for those who've got questions they'd like to ask some of my ALF guests, then you can become part of Team Doc Lures. You can see the schedule of interviews I've got lined up. You can pick guests that you'd like to ask questions of, post those questions, and I will certainly ask them to the guest and put their response into an extended episode of the podcast, ALF Plus, which will be available to all Team Doc Lures members. If you want to be part of that, you also want access to our panel of experts to ask questions off the podcast. You want to join our private TDL community where people are interacting, engaging. There are top anglers putting themselves out there as mentors. Or if you just want to listen to some audio masterclasses, some extra deep, in-depth information that we don't normally cover in the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, all of that's available at Team Doc Lures. So go and check it out at team.doclures.com. That's team, T-E-A-M, .doclures.com. I hope you check it out. I hope you decide to join us. If you do so, you'll have access to all of that within a few clicks and a few minutes. And I will see you inside the membership area. If not, I will be talking to you very shortly in the next Australian Lure Fishing Podcast coming up on Monday. It's going to be a cracker episode. I can't wait to air that one. Team Doc Lures members know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone else will have to wait. So guys, that's it for episode 377. I'm going to leave you now, but I look forward to seeing you out on the water sometime. Bye for now.
Don't miss a single episode of ALF. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes, or jump on the doclures.com website for downloads and show notes. Till their next episode, Tidelines.